people will say like a emotion is either good or bad, like anger's bad and excitement's good. But take excitement, for example. I mean, how many people fall prey to a get rich quick scheme because they were really excited about it, or they jumped at this new business because they didn't see the risk. And everybody else might be like, no, that was obvious that that wasn't a good idea. But our emotions get it. That 80% of the information on TikTok about mental health is actually incorrect. Some of it's downright harmful. And this is what all the young people are consuming, is they're scrolling through these mental health videos and informational things that are just wrong.
How do you help people connect the emotional and rational brain together so that they can respond rather than react?
That's a good question.
On Inspirational People, Inspirational Stories, I'm honoured to have my guest, Amy Morin. Amy is a renowned psychotherapist, international best-selling author, and one of the world's leading voices on mental strength. Her book, 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do, became a global phenomenon, inspiring a series of follow-up books for parents, women, kids, couples, and very soon, companies as well. On top of that, her TED Talk has had over 24 million views, and her work has helped millions of people build resilience through life's toughest challenges. Today, she joins us to share her incredible journey and powerful insights on mental strength and emotional well-being. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. I obviously saw you coming over to Dublin next month to speak at the Pendulum Summit alongside my great friends, Frankie and Norma. And it's an amazing event. It's one of Ireland's biggest inspirational events, and it's inspiring to have you there as well. Now, I saw on your TED Talk, which was brilliant, by the way, I saw in the TED Talk that there was a very incredible story about your mum and also your ex-husband or late husband as well. I'd love you to tell the audience a little bit about that and what inspired you to write your book as well, the first one.
Sure. So I became a psychotherapist, and about a year into my career, initially I thought, well, I learned all this stuff in college. I have all these skills and tools and knowledge, and I can impart all of the wisdom I have onto everybody that walks into my therapy office, and probably overestimated myself a bit. And about a year into my work as a therapist, my mom passed away suddenly. Was healthy as far as we knew, but she had a brain aneurysm that ruptured. And so she was here one minute and gone the next. And it was the first big loss in my life, but it was also a wake-up moment for me as a therapist, because I realized that a lot of the skills and the tools and the things I was saying to clients just didn't feel like enough. When I was grieving, it just felt like, yeah, these things are good, but they're not helpful enough when you feel like you're in a lot of emotional pain. And it's kind of a horrifying moment for me to think all this stuff I've been talking to people about so far falls short. And so I set off on this journey to learn as much as I could about mental strength and grief and what really helps people get through tough times. And I was glad that I did, because on the 3-year anniversary of the day that my mom passed away, my 26-year-old husband had a heart attack and died as well. And I didn't even know you could have a heart attack when you're 26. I'd never even heard of any such thing happening. We didn't know of any history of heart problems either. So much like when I lost my mom, losing him was just so sudden and unexpected. And it took my brain a long time to even like process what had just happened. I had just lost two of my favorite people in a 3-year span. And I'm supposed to be a therapist who helps other people deal with their problems, right? And it wasn't like I could just take all this time off from work. Suddenly I'm the only breadwinner, so I have to pay my bills and I have to pay for my mortgage. We'd already had a house at that point, and I had to figure it out. I took a little bit of time off from work, but still had to eventually go back to work after just a couple of weeks. And it was a long process of just putting one foot in front of the other and figuring out how to get through each day. But I felt so grateful that I was learning from people in my therapy office too. Like, I saw so many people who went through really dark times, and yet they still had hope and optimism, and they were still trudging through life. And I thought, what separates these people from people who just get stuck in life and they feel like they can never move forward? And one of the things I had been taught as a therapist was to point out what people are doing well and to keep building on that, to point out, gosh, you're doing this great, keep that up. But I realized that the people that were doing the best, yeah, they had good habits, but they also didn't have bad habits. And I was going to do them a disservice if I didn't point out the one or two perhaps habits that were keeping them stuck. And that's what I focused on in my own life too, is just don't do these certain things and you'll be okay. Because on the darkest days of my life, I certainly didn't want a long list of what to do. It was just about what not to do. And a few years after that, my father-in-law was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And we knew we were going to lose him. And unlike when I had lost my mom and my husband, this time I knew what was coming. And I just remember thinking, like, this isn't fair. I've lost so many loved ones. I can't do it again. And on one of my darkest days, I wrote myself a letter of what not to do. It was sort of all of those things I had learned over the years, but never written down in one place. When I was done, I had a list of 13 things that mentally strong people don't do. And I would read that letter to myself in the morning, and it would be like, okay, Amy, if you can just not do these things today, you'll get through the day okay. And I thought, oh, this is helpful. So the next day I did the same thing, and the next day. And then I thought, if this list is helpful to me, maybe it could help somebody else. So I published it on the internet, and I thought like 5 people would read it, but 50 million people read the list. And I got the opportunity to write a book. And that's why I still get to seek out mental strength today, because it seems like that idea that sometimes just giving up things that keep you stuck resonated better with people than a long list of what to do to stay mentally strong.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to someone the other day and I said, "What do you do to keep yourself positive?" "Oh, I focus on my strengths all the time." I said, "But what about having a look in a state of self-awareness at, your triggers, your traumas, your parental programs?" And she said, "Oh no, I don't want to do that because then I'll might see my imperfections and I'll feel worse about myself." I said, "Well, don't focus on them. Just have a look at them and then think of something on a positive side that you can almost change your mindset towards, and then maybe write an affirmation or something like that. If you're, say, having a lack of self-love, you might put, 'I am worthy of love,' or something like that." And I think there's too many people that are afraid at sometimes looking at themselves. And we're all perfectly imperfect. And if we can embrace our imperfections with love, because that's our uniqueness, it can make a massive difference to our outlook in life. But I have to say, Amy, you went through more than most people that I've ever come across in that period. It must have been really, really tough. I mean, out of those experiences, what really helped teach you and support you in terms of what you do now?
So, a few things like it was a really dark period. Even though I'm a therapist and I'm an author, I just can't find the language to even describe like what my 20s were like, other than to just say it was a really dark, painful period. But a few things that really helped. I was glad I was a therapist because then I at least knew about mental health. So I knew what things like anxiety, I knew a little bit about grief, I knew about acute stress disorder, which is what my doctor had diagnosed me with, which is sort of the precursor to PTSD. So it was helpful. I'm really thankful I knew those things. I also knew when life is rough to just focus on the basics, eating, sleeping, and moving. And if I could just manage those things on the roughest days, then okay, I'm doing my best. And I was fortunate I had a strong faith. I had grown up with a strong faith. So I also knew, like, okay, I'll get through this somehow, that God isn't supposed to give you more than you can bear. And I had wonderful friends and family as well who were there for me, and they didn't know what to do. There really wasn't anything they could do, but just knowing that they cared and that they were there for me. And one of the things that happens often when we lose a loved one is people are there during the first week and then they kind of disappear. But I was so fortunate that I had wonderful friends and family who stuck around. Weeks later, they were still checking on me. Months later, they were still taking me out to dinner. And they would come to my house and just sit with me on a Friday night and we'd do nothing at all. But it was those things that certainly helped. And I started reading books. I found some wonderful books that also helped me get through those darkest days. And then I did some fun stuff too. I decided to get a motorcycle and a motorcycle license. And I said, I'm going to go on some adventures and do some fun things as well so that I could kind of figure out in this new chapter of my life, like, who am I going to be? Because when you lose a spouse, you don't just lose the person, but you kind of lose a lot of the hopes and dreams and plans for the future that you had too. And so I had to figure out, who am I going to be now as a widowed 26-year-old? Like, what's my future going to be like? What dreams do I want to hold on to? And which ones do I want to let go of? And we had been foster parents at the time. And that was something I delayed for a while. I didn't want to be a single foster mom when I was still in the depths of grief. But later on, I picked it back up again. And there were certain things that I did just put on pause and I picked back up. And other things I said, I don't want to do this anymore. and had to figure out how to let go of those, which brings up another whole process of grief and thinking, okay, I want my life to look different. But then there's some good things too, and thinking, what might I do now that I am widowed? Perhaps new doors open too. What could I do differently? So, needless to say, it took years to get through that period, but was so grateful that I had the background in mental health and also had wonderful people surrounding me too.
I love that. And you obviously have had some tough times in terms of people passing and all that kind of stuff. I actually had a near-death experience myself where I actually died and came back. And I truly believe, having had that experience, that energy never dissipates. It moves from one form to another. And that we move on. I believe in reincarnation. And I do wonder whether we play this game of life again and again and again to see if we can get to a higher level of consciousness. And maybe those people out there are having a tough time. Maybe they should pat themselves on the back because maybe they played this game of life so often that they're testing themselves to the ultimate to see if they can get through all this crap and come out the other side as the best version of them. And I do actually think that, I think the universe is made up of darkness and light. And, there's going to be dark times, but if we can learn from them, grow from them, then we can potentially shine brighter in the light. But that's not always easy, as I'm sure you know. And I think there's a lot of people out there, especially with Gen Zs and with a lot of, social media oriented stuff now, not maybe being thrown out in the garden to beat each other up as kids and learn from their mistakes. I think maybe people's emotional brain and rational brain aren't quite connected together, maybe sometimes. How do you help people connect the emotional and rational brain together so that they can respond rather than react?
That's a good question because a lot of us will make decisions based on one more than the other. And it might be certain areas of our lives. So somebody might say to me, gosh, in my business life, I'm really logical. Things make sense. But then in my romantic life, everything's based on emotion. And I do these things that I would never do in the office. Why do I do these things? And the truth is, we make our best decisions when our logic and our emotion are in check. And if we made all of our decisions based purely on logic, we'd live really boring lives and we wouldn't have a lot of the passionate, fun things that we do. But if we lived just based on emotion alone, then we wouldn't save for a rainy day. We wouldn't plan for the future. We'd just be doing whatever feels good right now and we'd lack self-discipline. So sometimes this is just about taking notice. How do I feel right now? Uh, how intense are my emotions? And if you want to reduce the emotional intensity, the best thing you can do is raise your logic. So if I am tempted to make a really emotional decision, it's kind of impulsive to just take a breather for a minute and write down maybe all the logical pros and cons. And just reading a list of the logical side of the coin can help me then say, okay, although this is really exciting, maybe it's also really too risky for me to do. And we know that too when it comes to our emotions. People will say like a emotion is either good or bad, like anger is bad and excitement's good. But take excitement, for example. I mean, how many people fall prey to a get rich quick scheme because they were really excited about it, or they jumped at this new business because they didn't see the risk. And everybody else might be like, no, that was obvious that that wasn't a good idea, but our emotions get in the way. So when we're too emotional, it's important to look at the logic, but also when we're too logical, sometimes in life we're like, I don't really want to take a chance because it might not go well, so I'm just going to play it safe over here. That's when we need that emotion. Like, well, ask yourself, what if it does work out? And to really play into the emotions of happiness and excitement and the joy, and also recognizing that even if things don't work out perfectly, that's okay, that we can handle the emotional repercussions of that. Maybe it's uncomfortable, it's embarrassing, whatever it might be. But that's how we make our wisest decisions is when those things are in balance. So the first step is always just noticing, am I a little too high on the logic, too low? Where's my emotions? And then figuring out how do I factor both into the equation.
I love that. And you obviously, leading into your book, which is fabulous, obviously, your first one, obviously, you got lots of them now. Just in terms of those 13 don'ts, is there any of those 13 don'ts that you still at times slip into yourself and you have to be very, aware of, self-aware of to keep yourself out of them? Because I'm sure, like, I read them through and I thought to myself, okay, I try not to do all of those, but there's times that I slip up, and I don't know if it's the same for you as well.
Absolutely. And I think if anybody says I never do those 13 things, they probably lack self-awareness because the truth is we do. And sometimes it's easy when life is going well, you think, yeah, I don't feel sorry for myself. But then when something bad happens that feels like it's really unfair or it's unjust, all of us are going to start slipping into that idea of, yeah, I deserve better. Why do these things have to happen to me? And if you're not careful, you keep going down that path into self-pity. So for me personally, I would say, yeah, I can definitely fall prey to all 13 of those things at times. But the couple that I would struggle with the most are probably the ones right at the top of the list. One would be not feeling sorry for myself. I still have those moments when things aren't going well or they don't go as expected where I think, come on, like again, why do I have to struggle with something else? Or this isn't fair. And life's a roller coaster for all of us. There's emotional highs and lows and great things and bad things, but it's easy to think I've been through enough. I don't deserve anything else bad to happen to me. And so in those moments when life doesn't go well, I do find myself easily thinking those things like this isn't fair. And it's okay to be sad, but you just don't want to cross into that self-pity where you feel like you're hopeless and helpless. So I'm always trying to be aware of that one. And another one is just giving away my power, which is all about thinking other people have the ability to make you feel bad or ruin your day or steal your time. And taking back your power is really just about changing your language and owning up to it. No, it's up to me who I spend my day with, how I spend it, what I'm going to do today, and to not blame anybody else if my day doesn't go well, or if I'm in a bad mood, or if uh, if things don't go the way that I wanted them to. It's up to me, and accepting responsibility is a big piece of that.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm sure, like myself, like people think, "Oh, you're always positive, Doug. Does that mean you wake up every morning with a spring in your step?" And I'm like, "No, no. There's some days I wake up and I have to drag myself out of bed,
Of
drag myself
course.
into the office, and you sit there going, "What the bleep am I doing here?" And I'm sure you do as well. What do you? I mean, we've heard it all on social media: gratitude statements, affirmations, meditation, whatever, and they do work. But for someone who's in a real deep depression, it can sometimes be really hard to hear that. What do you personally do in terms of if you do wake up like one of those self-pity days? What do you go do, right? Amy, snap out of it. I need to do this, 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 this. And I know if I have my cold shower, if I know I do this, I do my meditation. Is there any kind of like morning routine that you do to help people? And then the second part of the question is if you're dealing with someone who's in really, really deep depression, suicidal tendencies, who will just look at you and go, really? A cold shower? Really? Gratitude? What would you advise them to do as well?
Yeah, so on those days when I do wake up and think, oh, I have 800 things I have to do today and I'm just not feeling it. I don't have a strict morning routine. I'm not getting up at 4 a.m. and doing a cold plunge and working out for 3 hours and meditating or anything like that. My first step is to the kitchen to get the coffee. And and I think just, on the way to go make my coffee, just to have a pep talk that just reminds me like, okay, some days you don't feel like it, and that's okay, but to not try to force it and to say you have to make this the best day ever. Sometimes it's like, okay, just not feeling it today, and that's okay, but I'll get through the day and being kind to myself rather than beating myself up if I'm not full of energy or if I don't feel like I'm in the world's best mood. That's okay. Days like that will happen. And I think accepting it is much better than always trying to fight it. And for people who are battling a deeper depression where it is tough, just getting out of bed sometimes can be a victory, getting dressed and putting one foot in front of the other. And I think it's just all about small steps and little goals and giving yourself permission to say, I got dressed and I went for a walk around the block today. Like that's a that's a victory in some ways if you aren't feeling it. And to give yourself permission to just get through the day sometimes because I think when people think, oh, all of my friends are doing X, Y, or Z, or I should be able to do this, or I used to be able to do so much more, and you beat yourself up for it, it makes it so much worse. Sometimes it's just about knowing what is it I can do today and how am I going to get through this next hour? You don't even have to plan the next 23 hours, just plan the next hour and having a plan for what you're going to do, what you're going to try to do. And it's all about experimenting. Sometimes people will say, I went for a 10-minute walk and I feel so much better. Somebody else might say, I went for a 10-minute walk and I don't feel any better. So then the question is, well, what are you going to try next then? Maybe reading a book helps. Maybe cleaning up your kitchen is something that's going to give you a little boost, but keep trying things until you figure out what works for you.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's those small steps, one by one, leading to bigger goals, and not try and push yourself too much. So, absolutely love that. And you've obviously been through a lot, and we were having a chat beforehand. And obviously, being a psychotherapist, I think people are embracing other modalities to help their clients or patients in the best way or form. What other things do you utilize in your tool belt, shall we say, to help people, as well as the traditional psychotherapist route?
So I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist at heart. I love to say, let's talk about, say, the story that you develop around your life and thinking I'm a victim of horrible circumstances versus reframing that to say, you know what? I'm a superhero because I survived horrible circumstances and how that can then affect you. But I don't think that sitting and just talking about horrible life experiences helps anybody to emerge as feeling great about what they went through. Reframing the story is part of it, but it's not all of it. And we know from the research there's so many things that people can do that are therapeutic that don't involve just talking about your trauma. So, for example, a drum circle. There's tons of research that shows being in a drum circle is so good for your mental health, helps people overcome trauma. Part of it's the community, but it's also the rhythm of drumming has amazing therapeutic benefits. Being around horses can be incredibly empowering for people. Sometimes it's working in a garden, being in nature. I'm a huge proponent of just being outside, being in nature, reading books. And it doesn't necessarily have to be self-help books in order to be therapeutic. We know that reading a fiction book, even if it's just for a few minutes a day, reduces our stress by a huge percentage. I can't even remember the percentage offhand, but it's huge. But it's also a fiction book is a great way to get inside somebody else's head because you hear what the narrator's thinking. And it's one of the few opportunities in life where we get to see that the way we think isn't necessarily weird. Other people have weird thoughts too. And for a lot of people, that's incredibly healing. So there's so many things. And I think volunteering, giving back, being kind to other people is one of the best things we can do. There's so much emphasis on self-care these days on social media. Like you should take a bubble bath when you're stressed out. I think one of the best ways to truly heal isn't about just focusing on myself and getting inside my own head and analyzing it even more. Sometimes it's looking outside myself and saying, what could I do to help somebody else? And it might be somebody who struggled with something similar, but it also might just be smiling and holding the door for a stranger. But when we put some kindness into the world, when we do something for somebody else, it reminds us that we matter and we have value. And that gives you a reason to get out of bed every day is to say, you know, I have the power to make the world a little bit better, even if it is just something small. But if I stay home and I stay in bed, I don't put that out into the universe. And for a lot of people, that's what it's all about. That can improve their mental health and give them mental strength to say, you know what? Am needed in the world, and there are things I can do for other people, and here's what I'm going to do. So I think any of those things can certainly improve our mental health. And I don't think everybody needs to go to therapy. I don't think talk therapy is the only way to heal. For some people, it's part of their healing journey, but for other people, these other things work just as well.
I totally agree. I think it is obviously the mental and emotional side, but also there's a kind of a spiritual and physical side as well. Physical, obviously, get out there, get in nature, get some exercise, do a sport that you enjoy doing. So like you mentioned earlier on about the drumming. Well, if you like team sport and you're young enough still to do it, get out there and have some fun. And then I think the spiritual side doesn't necessarily mean, religion. It can mean a sense of purpose, a sense of inspiration in terms of in spirit to be able to give you a sense of, what do you enjoy doing? What do you love doing? What are you gifted at doing? As you said, what can you add value to people in some way or form? And I think that is the greatest gift that you can sometimes give yourself is giving to others, which is what you adhered to, I think, there as well, which is beautiful. And I totally, totally agree. I found when I was going through tough times, when I started helping other people, it really, really helped me as well. And you can sometimes heal yourself a bit by healing others or helping others. So I love that. And I don't know if you've got kids, but I've got two kids and they're Gen Zs. And I have to say, I've noticed the kids of these days, sometimes their emotional intelligence and emotional resilience isn't quite what maybe it was for us in the old days. And it can be sometimes that they're looking at social media too much, getting the dopamines to hits too much. And I think sometimes it's more difficult for them to sit in the silence when there isn't the dopamines and be content in that. How can we help our children going forward to be able to cope in this new world, digital social media, so that we can protect their mental health?
So the first one is to talk about emotions. So many kids come into my therapy office and they might even say like, well, my parents feel mad sometimes, but they're never sad or they're never anxious. Because we don't really talk about those feelings. And it's normal as a parent to think, I don't want to burden my kids with my feelings, so I'm not going to tell them. But just talking about everyday things of, I saw this news story and that was really sad. Or, wow, the store looks really crowded today. I'm feeling kind of anxious about going in there. Just using those words in everyday conversation is really important for kids so that they can start to identify their feelings and then to also validate how they feel. Sometimes we're quick to say, like, don't worry about that, don't cry about it, or it's not a big deal, you shouldn't be so nervous. And we're teaching them that their feelings are wrong. So, one of the best things we can do is say, yeah, I understand. Because when you're 10 years old and there's a talent show coming up and you're nervous about it, those feelings are just as valid as when we're adults and we're nervous about something. So we really want to say, like, it's understandable that you'd feel that way. And what are we going to do about it? Maybe it's just sitting in the feelings, but also maybe it's practicing more or studying harder for a test. Or maybe you sit and you color a picture because that helps you to feel better. So talking about all of those coping skills, but also problem solving skills. When your child has a friend issue, we might be tempted to jump in there and solve it for them, but we want them to know you have a lot of options. What could you do? Talk to your friend, talk to the teacher, ask a question. So many things. So problem solve with them and then encourage them to find a solution ultimately that they want to try. And then when it comes to our screens, it's so important to be a good role model, but it's hard to do that. How many parents are sitting at the table checking their phones and scrolling when we're bored as well? We want to role model to kids that there's going to be times when it's inappropriate to use your phone and to set limits on it. I don't think kids should be sleeping with the phone in their bedroom at night. It's because if their friend texts them at 2 in the morning, you don't want them answering. You don't want them scrolling before they go to sleep. So I think we should charge phones in the kitchen, make that a rule, including mom or dad's phones get charged in the kitchen at night too, which is scary for a lot of people because we're used to sleeping with it right next to our heads. And then to give kids a break from their phones too. Maybe Saturdays from 8 a.m. until 3 p.m., we're not going to use our phones. And then, of course, some families are going to say, yeah, but what are we going to do if we don't have screen time? What are we going to do without our digital devices? Well, kids can learn to play outside and play board games. And there's so much research that shows when kids have a break from their devices, their emotional intelligence increases. There's this one study where they asked kids to identify how people were feeling, and almost all the kids were struggling by looking at faces and watching movies to say, how does this person likely feel? And so they took half the kids and they sent them to summer camp and they didn't give them their devices for a week. When they came back, their emotional intelligence had skyrocketed just after 7 days without a phone. Suddenly they could recognize how people were feeling, they could identify the emotion. And I always think back to that study of how powerful that is. Just getting a break from their screens help them to increase their emotional intelligence because suddenly they're paying attention to real people's faces and emotional reactions rather than just looking at it on a screen.
I love that. I always say that emotional intelligence is probably the most grounded version of consciousness because it's all about self-awareness, it's all about empathy, it's all about compassion, conscious communication, self-regulation, and also that self-motivation as well. In terms of what you do and what advice you can give to people, what would you say is effective ways that they can improve their emotional intelligence?
So it starts with just learning to recognize how you're feeling. We know that adults don't even really use feeling words that much in everyday conversation. We're much more likely to say, oh, I felt bad about that, or I was upset by something somebody said. But we don't really say sad, mad, happy, angry. We certainly don't get into the more nuanced feelings of, say, frustrated, or we don't talk about maybe feeling disappointed or slightly embarrassed. And so for some people, that's where we'll start is I'll say print out a list of feeling words and you hang it on your bathroom mirror. And when you brush your teeth in the morning and in the evening, just pick, how do you feel right now? And see if you can put a name to it. And when we label our emotions, it takes a lot of the sting out of it. And research will show if you can say, I feel really sad right now, your sadness actually goes down a bit. Or I feel really anxious right now. You feel a little bit less anxious as soon as you put a label to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would start there with just learning how to label those emotions and then to take the next step and you think, well, how does this affect me today? Let's say I'm really anxious about something in my personal life. I go into work and my boss says, "Hey, Amy, do you want to take on this new project?" I'm much more likely to say no. Even though my anxiety is about something at home, it spills over into work. And if I don't recognize that, then I might say no to everything that comes my way for a while without even realizing that the two things aren't connected or why I'm doing it. Or when we're sad, you should never negotiate when you're sad. If you walk into a negotiation feeling bad, I'm going to make an offer. Maybe you make a counter offer, and I'm just going to say, okay, I'm not going to negotiate very hard because I think I can't handle one more blow. So if you say no to me, then I'll be even more sad. So to protect ourselves, we tend to be terrible negotiators when we're sad, but you don't know that unless you first identify how you're feeling. And then number two, connect the dots to how's this going to affect me in my decision making today. And then once we do those two things, then we can start paying more attention to not just how I feel, but how you feel. So if we're having a conversation and you look completely disinterested, maybe I want to figure that out and check in with you. Or if you look like you're really sad, or if I know that I'm going to have a conversation with you that's anxiety provoking, I'll keep that in mind that for you, this is anxiety provoking. So how might I make things more comfortable? And that's, I think, how we start to increase our emotional intelligence and trial and error and practice and putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations and doing things, having the hard conversations that really tests our skills.
Yeah, I think quite often, I think there's too many people that want to try and stay in their comfort zone and don't put themselves out of that. And the resilience can be built through that, through I remember when I was a kid, I would sometimes have conversations with friends we were in our like young teenage, and we'd be on the football pitch, the soccer pitch. We might hurt each other, punch each other, and by the end of it, we're friends again with each other. But these days, I think the sensitivity of some of the kids can be so much that they go, "Oh, I'm never speaking to that person again. Right, I'm out of here," kind of thing, and it's not right. And we were talking as well, interlinked to that there's a lot of stuff on social media that is not true. And in terms of mental health, what common piece of bad mental health advice do you see on social media and you wish it could disappear?
Oh, wow, that's a great question because there's so much of it. And I think words are used inappropriately all the time. So suddenly everybody's a narcissist or
Mm.
everybody's gaslighting each other and everybody's diagnosing themselves. So we know that 80% of the information on TikTok about mental health is actually incorrect. Some of it's downright harmful. And this is what all the young people are consuming is they're scrolling through these mental health videos and informational things that are just wrong. And there's diagnostic quizzes that are convincing people that they have mental illnesses that they don't. And there's so many, I think, sayings and things that tend to go viral that aren't true either. Like, for example, the one that gets me a lot is when people say, you can't love anybody else until you learn to love yourself. That is actually the opposite of the truth. You, as a baby, hopefully your caregivers loved you and they taught you what love was, and that's how you learn to love yourself. And that's why when people grow up in homes where they didn't feel loved, they struggle to love themselves and they struggle. But if they have one caring adult in their life who showed them what love was, it makes it so much easier to then love yourself. So I think there are a lot of things like that, or people say hurt people hurt people. That's not always accurate either. There's so much more that goes into it, and sometimes people who just feel entitled hurt other people. And and I think all these conversations that we have these days about mental health, people will say, well, that's great. We're spreading awareness and it's normalizing it. But in some ways, it's also hurting people who have mental health issues. So somebody might say, well, we all have anxiety. So I don't know why this person makes it a big deal. Well, yes, there's the emotion of anxiety, but an anxiety disorder is different. That
Mm.
when we say, well, I have anxiety too, but I can still do these things, we're making somebody else's mental illness invalidated, or we're telling them you should just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get over it because we all struggle with it when we don't. It would be like saying that we all were physically healthy or physically ill and therefore we're all in the same boat. Like it's not true. There's a lot of different mental health issues. It's a continuum. You aren't either completely mentally healthy or completely mentally ill on any given day. Any of us fall in a different spot on that continuum based on the conversations we're having, what we ate for lunch, how well I slept last night, and we all have room for improvement.
Yeah, I agree. I see that you mentioned narcissists at the start, and I can see that a lot on social media when people are pointing the finger But your vibe attracts your tribe, right? So when you point the finger, there are three pointing back at you. So when you take responsibility for yourself, your change, your mental health, your perspective, you might just find the people around you change as well. And quite often I see people, and it's a real shame, where people are outing their exes, who are sometimes still the parents of their children, on social media, saying that he or she was a right narcissist and all that. And kind of outing your ex when you've got kids is a bit of an act of narcissism in itself. So I don't think it's a great thing. I think, we all fall in love with someone at some stage. And okay, you fall out of love with them for whatever reason. And maybe it is something that was horrible and everything like that. But go back in grace of remembering why you fell in love with them and appreciate the gratitude of the journey, the experience, and the learnings, and take them and move on rather than, like you say, getting stuck in the past too much, which isn't great. So, and look, we've kind of covered a lot of it, but out of the things that you haven't said so far, if someone is stuck with, certain, I don't know, character traits, then it might be self-doubt, lack of self-love, it might be procrastination, it might be fear, it might be not feeling good enough, it might be control issues or perfectionism. How do you help people in terms of practical ways of doing it to be able to take those and change those? Because I think you also said a beautiful thing there about when you go into negotiations. Negotiations, and this might be slightly different, but I'm going to try and bring it into the same question. Negotiations in business. I saw a Fortune magazine article showing that the top 100 places to work for, in terms of the happy factor, in terms of business, their stock market returns over a 10-year period average annualized at about 14%. And those outside of that top 100 was only 6%. So there's a massive difference. And as a fund management guy, I can see that because the day before Thanksgiving, the day before Independence Day, the day before, whatever, it generally has 80% of the time the stock market goes up. And that's why what you do and what I do is so important for businesses as well as people as well. But going back to the start, which helps business people as well as individuals as well, how do they change those procrastinations, those self-doubts, those fears, those worries, those control? How do you tell them to practically change those?
A lot of it starts with self-awareness and just realizing that the things that we do, our habits, often come back to our core beliefs, right? So when we grow up thinking, oof, I don't quite fit in, I'm not good enough, I'm worthless, I'm useless, whatever it might be, those core beliefs lead to certain habits, right? So somebody might say, I procrastinate projects because I'm afraid it won't be perfect. And if I pass something in and it's not perfect, then that would just be proof that I'm not good enough. So therefore, I can't do my work. And then they end up sabotaging themselves because it's the night before it's due and they're slapping something together, which is their biggest nightmare. And these patterns in other people are often really easy to spot, but they're so hard to see in ourselves. So sometimes it's about writing down some of these things. And if you keep a journal, if you just write down, here's the emotion, here's what happened, here's the consequence, over time you start to recognize the patterns in your own life, and then you can trace back to, like, where does this go back to? Oh, when I was 7, or maybe it goes back to when you were in college, or a difficult period in your life. Our brains work really hard to protect us. It doesn't want you to get blindsided. It doesn't want you to get hurt. So it comes up with these protective measures, but we don't necessarily need those. So your brain's attempt to, say, make you a perfectionist actually backfires, but it thinks it's protecting you. So it's about learning to recognize those patterns, the habits that come of it, and then making a conscious choice to say, I'm going to do something different. It's going to be uncomfortable, but I'm going to try something out of the norm. Like when therapy will say, if what you're doing isn't working, the solution is DSD, do something different. And it seems so obvious on the surface, but it really is when you experiment with, okay, I usually wait till Friday night to get my Friday project done. I'm going to try doing it on Tuesday this week and see what happens. Or I never ask for help because I'm embarrassed, but today I'm going to ask one person if they would read this over. And those little things, when we start experimenting, you can train your brain to see yourself a little bit differently. Maybe I'm more capable and competent than I give myself credit for. Or the predictions that we make, like if I ask you for help, you're going to judge me, and then I'll be so embarrassed, I'll never get a promotion and things will be terrible. Well, I don't know until I try. So I say, all right, I'm just going to ask one person for just a little bit of help. And then I see it's not as bad as I predicted. Okay, so now I know I can't always trust those predictions my brain makes. So I'm going to try one more step. And over time, that's how we start to really change how we see ourselves, what our habits are, and how we behave and show up in the world.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, like you said earlier on, it's all about the small steps leading to greater change in the future. And don't beat yourself up along the way, because it does take time to change and it does take time to make. I think it's almost like we have that pattern that this is the way we think, speak, and act. This is our personal personality. And in order to change our personality to create a new personal reality, we need to have a new path. But what happens quite often is on along the way we go back like a clapping seal back to this all the time until eventually we manage to stick to this path rather than going back to the kind of the trajectory that we started off with, which is always very. And actually one of the things I also say is maybe try and gamify it as well. Gamify life as when these difficult people come in, see them as like obstacles in a PlayStation game. How can I get around this? How can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? And I think sometimes almost, the mental negative thoughts, you could think them if you watched Harry Potter like a dementia that's coming in that just kind of or something like that. And if you can try and think of a positive way of taking that negative thought and sending it to the light or heaven or whatever you believe in, it might be a good way of gamifying it in some good way or form.
I
And talk,
love the idea of gamifying things. I think if we were playing a video game, then we look at things as a challenge, right? It's an obstacle that I'm meant to get around or get over and I have to figure it out. And if we just looked at life that way, instead of thinking I'm not good enough, this is a threat, I can't possibly solve this problem. No, you could if it was a video game. So why not figure that out in life? I love that idea.
yeah, you could pretend that you're Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, trying to turn those negative thoughts from the darkness to the light. And every time you can change it by almost that negative thought comes in and you go, negative thought, you've obviously come to me because I am Luke Skywalker and you're looking to turn back into the light. So I'm going to send you to the light. And then you imagine it going up to the light. And when it's up there, you say, negative thought, now that you're in the light, what have you got to say to me? And hopefully, then all it'll say is, "You're wonderful, Amy. You're wonderful, Doug, or you're wonderful, whoever." And I think that could be a good way. And then you could count how many times you do it during the day to create a
Right?
kind of a points, create prizes, or something like that. Anyway, making this up as I go along. But now, talking of great things of the future, I know you have a new book coming out. I'd love you to tell the audience a little bit about when the book is coming out, what the book is about, and how it can help people, because I believe it's about businesses rather than just people as well.
Yeah, so it's the first book outside of my 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do series. So this one is called The Mental Strength Playbook, and it will be available at the end of April internationally. And it's all about the strategies that we can use in the workplace. So this was the number one question I was getting from people is like, okay, you've taught me how to set boundaries with my mother-in-law, but how do I set boundaries with my boss? Or it's one thing that when I come home from work, I know I should take care of myself and do these things, but what do I do in the office? If it's having a really stressful day and it's my lunch break, what's the best way to spend my lunch break? Or what's the best way to deal with this project that I didn't choose, but it was assigned to me and I don't want to do it? So it's filled with 50 strategies that can get you through the day at work, whether it is procrastination, perfectionism. There's a section in there called Gamify the Grind, and it's all about how to turn your work projects into something that's fun so that you can deal with all of the emotions that come up with it. But it's also about getting along better with people, increasing your happiness, boosting your confidence, dealing with anxiety, dread, all of those things that come into the workplace that we don't often talk about.
Oh, I love that. I really love that. I always say as well, have a look at the energetics of what you do, even if you're the janitor or you're the secretary, and how it interlinks energetically to the end granny or grandpa, mother, father, brother, sister, son, and daughter, so that you have that vision in your mind that what you're doing isn't just clock in, clock out. It's actually about adding value to somebody's life. And that'll give you a sense of inspiration when you wake up in the morning rather than just going, oh, here we go again, another day kind of thing. So I love that. Sounds like I'm going to get that book. This sounds like a great book to read. So if you are out there, when does that come out?
At the end of April.
End of April. Fantastic. Well, anyone listening, look out for Amy's new book. And if you haven't bought her previous books, go out and buy one of those as well. Amy, we're running out of time. But I have to ask, I've always asked a question at the end, which I always say, if I was to give you a stage, and I know you speak on stage, you're going to be speaking hopefully in front of about 2,500 people when you're over here in Ireland. If I was to give you a stage in front of, say, 10,000 people, and I was beaming it out now on my podcast to 8 billion people around the planet, and you were 94 years of age, and it was your legacy speech, what message would you like to leave with the world?
Oh, that is a fun question. I guess I would want to talk about the fact that you're stronger than you think. And so often we go through life doubting ourselves and assuming we can't handle things if they don't work out. But just put yourself out there and try to do things. Even when your brain underestimates you and tells you you can't do something, just say challenge accepted and do it anyway. And that's how you discover what you're actually capable of doing.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Amy, we run out of time. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I wish you every success in going forward. I hope you have a great time when you're over in Ireland, and I wish you every success with the new book as well.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to speak to you today, Doug.
Likewise. My name's Doug Gordon, and you've been listening to Amy Morin on Inspirational People, Inspirational Stories. I'll be back next week with another inspirational guest. In the meantime, if you need to get in touch, please contact me at doug@dougdgordon.com. From all of us here on the team of the show, I wish you a truly inspirational week and look forward to speaking to you next time. Bye for now.